Hello, Georgetown. I'm Beverly Enos, and you're watching Spotlight Georgetown. You can find us Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. on your local cable station. This is your cable TV show, so if you want to be on the show, come and join us. If you want to learn how to run a camera, let me know. We can make that happen. If you want to be in the hot seat, let me know. We can make that happen too. So today we're talking to Ross Panakopoulos from the TRIAD Driving Academy here in Georgetown. He's on Central Street, correct?
Main Street.
Main Street.
Oh, East Main Street.
East Main,
Right.
Main Street. Okay. East Main. All right. Now, where are you from? You're not from Georgetown?
No, originally from Peabody.
Okay.
We have another facility in Beverly, and this is our second facility here in Georgetown.
And you have family?
I do. I have my
lovely wife is
yes,
here
my
with
wife
you?
and my daughter actually are the owners of the company.
Okay.
My son also helps teach, so it's a family affair. Mother-in-law is in the office. So
Okay.
very, very family.
Everybody's involved.
Everybody's involved. It's one happy family.
Now, some background. Why did you become involved with driver's education?
Well, because of my background, as you said, was a big part of that. I've been a police officer for 30 years. I retired about 8 years ago. I spent time as a police officer in the military, local police, and 26 years on the state police. 21 out of my 26 years, I was specially trained as an accident reconstructionist, which meant that I went to an awful lot of fatal car crashes. I myself reconstructed over 400 fatal car crashes, majority of them being teenagers.
So you figured they better learn how to drive correctly.
Well, when my kids were going through driver's ed, I was not impressed. I was not impressed with what they were getting. I was not impressed with the amount of hours that they were being taught. They were always being let out early, dropped off early, and it really kind of hit me, Beverly, to tell you the truth, that here I am reconstructing fatal car crashes, and I'm realizing that driver's ed was a joke, that people weren't taking it seriously. If the companies themselves were not taking it seriously, because for so long, driver's ed was basically a part-time job.
Yeah.
They had teaching positions full-time as a general rule, and they did this at night and on weekends. Tried to get in touch with them, nearly impossible.
Yeah, I
you
took
know.
driver's ed from a private company, and we did it at night.
Mm-hmm.
And mostly what we did was learn the questions from the book,
Right.
so that we could take the test to get our learner's permit.
Right.
And then small amounts of driving in back streets. Mine was in Haverhill.
Mm-hmm. And
Because I lived in
I
Georgetown.
honestly believe that a lot of them were operating still that way when we first got into the business, which was 10 years ago.
Okay.
We just wanted to make it more professional. We wanted to have something more than just teach them how to pass the test.
Okay, so why is TRIAD Driving Academy different? What do you do that's different than the others?
For that real reason, we not only obviously go through the book, and we do tell them, all the things they need to know to pass the test and then to become good drivers. We do that, obviously. We have to follow the curriculum and outline set forth by the R&V. But we think we go a little bit further. We show them the fluids of a car. I mean, we spend one of our classes actually in the engine of the car, showing them the different fluids.
Under the hood?
Oh, yeah, under the hood.
Really?
Yeah. We actually have the class change a tire. They have to read the manual, get the tools out, jack the car up, remove the tire, put the spare back on. I always kid with our students, with our parents, that we've been doing this for 10 years, and it's amazing how much faster they can do it in January than they can July.
Because it's cold.
Of course.
I don't want to be out there.
January, it takes them about 10 minutes. July, it's like a 45-minute project out there, but it's okay. It's all good. And they learn, not that we're trying to make mechanics out of them, but, we're just trying to give them some common sense. We go into a lot more detail than I think other driving schools would go into. With my background, reconstructing crashes, what we use to reconstruct crashes, the power that the police have to subpoena certain things, one of which would be a crash data recorder, which is kind of what I have right here. This is something that a lot of people are totally unaware of that's in their car. They may have heard about it. Some people call it the black box.
I was just going to say, is that like a black box of an airplane?
It is. Similar to it. That's
Really?
what people like to refer to it as. But in reality, it's called a an event data recorder.
Now, where is that in my
Well,
car?
This is bolted to your floor. It's either underneath your front passenger seat or someplace underneath your radio where you can't see it. And
Okay.
its primary function is to deploy the airbags and record when the deployment occurs. Now, what happens in the meantime, though, is prior to the airbags being deployed,
Okay.
it stores a great deal of information, such as the speed of the car prior to impact, where the brakes are applied, where how much acceleration is applied to the vehicle, different turn angles of the steering wheels. There's a lot of information that with a summons, with a warrant, the police can actually download this information in a criminal or civil case.
So when somebody says, I thought I stepped on the brakes, but I must have stepped on the gas, that would tell them?
It will. Exactly.
Wow.
Every car has one, but the police do not have the ability to download all the information from all of the cars. The majority of the cars they do. So something like this, it would be a perfect example of what we explain to our students. We actually show them what the police can get if they are involved in a fatal car crash. We, for instance, show them what they get for information from the phone. They can see the incoming and outgoing text messages, the times, what's said, everything.
But officer, I was not texting on my phone.
And that's exactly right. And I feel by treating our students like adults, because they are about to do an extremely adult thing, drive a car. The responsibility is awesome. They need to respect that responsibility. And I think they need to know what the consequences can be. You familiar with the Haverhill area? You know, Massachusetts set case law. We were the first state in the country to actually send a young boy to jail 2 weeks after his 17th birthday when he was texting and driving, drifted over the center line and killed a operator from New Hampshire. And he was sent to jail for 2 years for something he did when he was just 17 years and 2 weeks old. So this is some serious stuff that these kids have to deal with.
Yeah.
So it's something that we like to talk about. We want to make sure they understand, you know, the implications of what could happen. And just like you said, officer, I wasn't texting. Well, maybe your mother and father and somebody might believe you, but if you get into a serious car crash, there's going to be people getting warrants, and information is going to be found out.
Right.
So, yeah, and we, you know, we really, outside of that, and I'm sure you've all heard horror stories where driving schools let kids out early and stuff like that. We don't let our kids out early. I mean, we give them 30 hours of training, and that's what the requirement is.
Is that the requirement now?
Yes, 30 hours, and they have to do 12 hours behind the wheel, which is one of the main reasons why driver's ed used to be in high schools and stuff years ago.
That was my next question, yeah.
Exactly. When they upped it from 6 hours of driving to 12 hours, that really made it difficult for high schools to keep up with that type of driving. And they made some of the regulations a little bit more difficult for them. So as a result, a lot of the high schools dropped out. There's still a few around on the North Shore, but not very many. I think Marblehead does, and I'm not quite sure if anything up here in Haverhill does or something like that.
Because Georgetown used to be the band teacher.
Yes, there you go.
Was
There
the
you
driver's
go.
ed
Yep,
teacher for
yep.
20 years.
Yep. And you know, I'm sure they did their best, and I'm sure they did
He
a good
did.
job.
Most of the kids in
Absolutely.
Georgetown learned how to
Sure,
drive
sure,
with him.
absolutely.
Mr.
Yeah.
Doss, he was a great. He was a great
Yep.
driver's ed
Yeah,
teacher.
and I don't think that that, you know, in many ways, because we also have a at the North Shore Academy in Beverly, we also teach class there, and when you're in their school environment and you have the students there, it makes it a lot easier for them to learn. You know, not pulling them out and mixing them into a class with
Right.
40, 50 other students, like sometimes our classes are.
So it's 30 hours now. How many lessons does that make it? How
Okay.
many lessons of learning the book?
Okay. Well, what we do is we have 10 3-hour modules for the 30 hours, and we break up each module into different things, and we eventually will go through the whole R&V book from front cover to back cover. We have 4 exams, so we really hold the kids to task about the book. You know, they need to know this information, especially the new laws that came out back in '07 about junior operators, and that was the biggest change. were these new laws about increased speeding penalties, passenger restrictions for new drivers. Can't have passengers for the first 6 months unless they're siblings and things like. Oh yeah,
And your driver cannot have a passenger unless it's a sibling?
Yes, or somebody over the age of 18
Okay.
in the car. But they can't have somebody their own age in the car.
Now, how old do you have to be to get a driver's license now?
16 and a half. They can start. I'm sorry.
So if I'm 16 and a half and I have a driver's license, I can't have another 16-year-old person in the car with me?
No, not unless they're related to you. Right.
Really?
Yep.
Boy, does that stop all the fun.
Yes, and not like not like when I got my license. I'm sure I tried to pile in as many of my friends as I could right from the get-go. But,
okay, so 16 and a half, unless it's a sibling,
yeah.
they have to be 18?
18 or older.
Or older.
The passenger has to be 18
passenger.
or older, and that's for their first 6 months, to kind of give them a chance to really learn how to drive without distractions. And as a little side thing, part of the whole curriculum, a parent has to take a 2-hour parent class. So we explain this to the parents in detail about these laws. And I actually think that's the best provision of this whole new junior operator law, is the fact that we're bringing parents in, because they really need to know the elements of this law, because if they didn't, then the whole enforcement falls on police officers, the registry, and the courts.
Yeah, sure, Johnny, you can take the car, take your friends
Yeah,
out.
exactly. So with the parents knowing about it, at least some of the responsibility is on the shoulders of the parents to make sure their kids are doing the right thing.
Okay.
Sometimes that doesn't always happen, as we know.
Now, when you're doing the driving, do you have them drive your car or their cars?
Yes, we always use our cars, because our cars are inspected by the registry routinely, and also we have a second brake, which is very useful from time to time.
No second steering wheel, but a second
No.
brake.
Remember those years ago? They did. They actually did have a steering wheel on the other side.
When I learned, there was a second steering wheel. Yeah.
I don't know whatever happened to that, but I'm sure that was an enormous expense. So, but we find that the brake and the ability to grab the wheel, if necessary, is usually works out enough. Yeah, yeah, it's pretty good.
So there's a second brake.
Yes, very, very helpful. And we're something that we also kind of pride ourselves in. We have different vehicles, because they should be used to driving different types of vehicles.
So different sizes, different
Right,
styles.
exactly. We have 3 SUVs, which to my knowledge, we're the only driving school on the North Shore that has SUVs, because so many families have SUVs. So we wanted them to be able to drive something
that's higher up.
A little higher up, sure, and they're all-wheel drive. So when it's snowing, we still conduct our driving lessons, unless it's dangerous, obviously, then we would not. We take into consideration how much experience the student has and the weather conditions, and kind of make a judgment call.
The first time out, you're not going to take them in a snowstorm.
Exactly. We have a Ford Fusion, we have Sentras, we have Altimas. Not only are they different sizes, but they're different setups on the dashboards and where instruments and the gauges and all that is, and they've got to be familiar with all this stuff,
I can see trying to put on the windshield wipers, and they're shifting the car.
Right, and it's different thing, and that happens. That happens, absolutely.
It happens to me.
Yep. And
I get a new car and I got to do something, and all of a sudden, the wipers are going on.
With me, it's when I rent a car. And then when I'm done with my vacation and go back to my own car, suddenly I'm still reaching for things in the old rent-a-car where I.
Or I borrow, or I rent a car, and all of a sudden I'm there at night going, okay, where are the lights?
Yeah.
which one is the lights?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, there's one more important component to the new law, is the parents have to drive their children, parent or guardian, for at least 40 hours. Now, they don't have to document it, but they do have to sign under pains of penalties that they have driven their child at least 40 hours. And that's important. That's not nearly enough. But
taking their kids on the road driving for 40 hours?
Right. That's a requirement prior to them getting their license.
Oh, my goodness.
And the idea is, obviously, that they should be taking them out different times of the day, different conditions, on the highway, on the secondary roads, and spending a little bit of unique time with them.
I don't think I'd have my license now.
Well, there are some parents that I think are a little let's say, shirking their responsibilities.
Oh, no,
and
my
not
mother would have
doing
had a
that.
panic attack.
Yeah, there you go. Well, it is funny. Very often the students will say they can drive with one parent better than they can with the other parent.
My mother was
Absolutely.
convinced I was going to knock over every mailbox in the street.
I bet she was.
We lived in a narrow street. We lived on Lakeshore Drive, and then the street was narrow. And she was convinced I was going to take out every single mailbox. Okay. So we did the number of lessons. And how many hours do you take them out on the road?
12 hours
Okay.
that they're actually driving, and 6 hours that they have to be in the car observing another student. So they're on
12 plus 6.
right. So a total of 18 hours they're with the driving
12
school.
in the front seat, 6 in the
Right,
back.
right. And the way we do it at our driving schools, and I'm sure a lot of other driving schools do it similar, we do 9 2-hour lessons. So sometimes they're driving for 2 hours, and sometimes they're driving for an hour and observing for an hour. But during that time, we try to get them out onto the highway, which a lot of driving schools don't. They got the mentality, let's just practice getting them
Out
to pass.
97 and in 133.
Right, exactly, But, you got to get away from the mentality of let's just teach them to pass the test. Let's show them how to be good, safe drivers.
What registry do you use?
Well, that's
use?
getting hard now. I don't know if you've been following any of all that news about that. It's been a disaster. And we actually are fortunate enough is that we're large enough of a school that we actually hire the registry and they come to us, which driving schools can do if they have the resources, if they have at least 25 students that can take the test at any given time, which we do. So we try to do a test every 2 weeks.
So that makes a difference.
Yes, we request a particular day, and then the registry, if they can fulfill that day, they will. If not, in the past, thank God, they've come back and said, well, we can't do it on a Sunday, but we can do it on a Monday night or a Tuesday night. And they will come right to our school in Beverly and just do 25 of our students. They leave the parking lot, do their test, and come right back to the parking lot.
They do some of the testing at night?
Yes, they do, and sometimes in the rain and sometimes in the snow.
Ooh.
Again, if it's not too dangerous, they'll be out there doing it, yep.
Okay. Now, what's the cost of a driving school now?
Hours here in Georgetown is $750, and that would include the classroom, the 30 hours, the 12 hours of driving, the 6 hours of observation, the 2-hour parent class, and then there's one piece of documentation that we have to send into the registry that includes that because there's a fee for that. And then the parents or the child has to pay an additional $115 to the Registry of Motor Vehicles because they have to pay for their permit.
For the permit.
Their licensed road test, no matter where they take the road test, they still have to pay for a licensed road test and $50 to change their permit into a license because they don't do it at the registries anymore. They actually mail it to them. So it can be an expensive thing from start to finish. With road tests, we're talking about $1,000, I would think. And if they take a road test with us, that is additional because we do encourage them to take road tests in their own cars with their own, with their parents or guardians because they should be. If they've driven their own car for 40 hours, they should be more familiar with their own car.
Okay.
So if the parents
And
do
the
what they're
parent
doing,
would go with them.
yes, right, and then therefore we wouldn't charge them the additional fee. But if they come to us, we would charge an additional fee because we're also paying the registry to come to us and to set that whole thing up.
Okay.
So it's very interesting. It's not like your old driving schools where 10 years ago everything
The ages of
changed.
most of the people that you get taking driving.
Yes, well, they can actually sign up for driver's ed when they're 15 years and 9 months, which is actually a good idea because then they'll get all the classroom done.
Yeah.
They can't begin driving until they get their permit, so they can get their permit when they're 16. They can get they're eligible for their road test after they've had their permit for 6 months. But the majority of our students, I would say, are between 16 and 18. We do get quite a few that are older in their early 20s that are maybe in college, and then some of them will take the whole course to try to get that insurance discount because that's 10% off your compulsory insurance. So
Okay.
that helps. It will definitely pay back the expense of the training.
Mm-hmm. As I said earlier, I teach in senior centers, and I have some women that their husbands pass away, and they've never had a driver's license. because their husbands have taken them every place.
Right.
Do you see that? I don't see it as much now, but I used to see it maybe 10 or 20 years ago. I used to see it a lot.
Yep.
Do you see that very often?
10 years ago, we did see it a lot, right?
Yeah.
Because we've been in business for 10 years. We have not seen it that much recently. We do get a lot of phone calls, several phone calls a month, say, from people wanting that they have to go retest because of one issue or another, and sometimes we'll give them a lesson prior to going for the retest and things like that. So
Okay.
we'll get that occasionally.
That was one of the questions. What
yeah.
happens when someone loses their license and has to take a test again?
Yeah, well, they treat them just like it's the same road test as if it was given to a teenager. It's the same thing: parallel parking, backing up straight, 3-point turns, hand signals, all that stuff. The problem is, though, that as somebody gets a little older, it's harder to do the things, for instance, turning your head and making sure you're checking your blind spot, because we all get a little lazy and we think looking in the mirror and
your neck doesn't turn as well either.
That's right. We know that. So these are the things, or when you're backing up, you have to be looking out the back window, not watching the camera that's in your car.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes they do have difficulties passing that test, and it could be because of some physical disability.
Okay, now this is a strange one, and you call it something different than I've heard it called. What's a ghost line, or what did you call it?
Fog line.
Fog line.
Right. They would be that white line on the edge of the roadway, is what we refer to as a fog line.
On the right side.
Right side, correct.
Yeah.
White's always right.
Yeah.
Easy way to remember. If you see that white line on your left, you're in trouble.
And I know somebody that was being retested that did not get her license because she crossed over that.
Oh yes. They are very strict, and,
Yeah.
and they are, and you know something, you can understand that you would not want to put your name on a license and then have that person go out and either be involved in a fatal car crash or be killed themselves, and knowing that they were just tested 24 hours earlier or a couple of days earlier. That's a lot of responsibility.
Somebody else that was
for 'em.
in a lane, somebody in front of her was making a left-hand turn, cutting across traffic. So she went around on the right side and crossed that white line. Again, got a ticket.
Got a ticket.
For crossing that white line.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's Yeah, because
I
you
had
are
never heard of
allowed
such a thing.
in this state to pass on the right as long as it's,
Yep.
reasonable and proper. Yeah.
Favorite ghost stories. Favorite horror story. Do you have a favorite horror story of the classes? You've got that extra break, but you still have to have a couple of favorite horror stories.
Well, I got to tell you, the children today, teenagers today, are not as motivated to get their licenses as I think I was when I was a teenager.
Oh yeah, we couldn't wait.
Yeah, couldn't wait. Some of them have really no desire to get their license, and very often their parents or grandparents are pushing them into the whole thing. So some of these children haven't been paying much attention to what their parents have been doing. And I remember picking up a student once in Beverly, and I knew it was his first time, and you always expect your first-time student, you're going to spend a little bit more time. So I'm really spending a lot of time going through all the instruments and all that stuff and making sure he understood everything. And I said, okay, are you all set to go? And he goes, one more question. I go, what's that? And he goes, which one's the brake and which one's the gas? And I knew I was in trouble. So I would say if I had to tell a horror story, that's one of them. And it was extremely difficult because our next student was in Lynn. I was trying to figure out how to take all right turns from Salem to Lynn without ever having to take a left turn. So that became a very interesting hour lesson, I can tell you that.
Okay.
That's my favorite.
All right. I can imagine that one. Yeah. How many kids do you have now, or I'm just going to say kids, do you have now going for licenses on standard transmissions?
Very few. Occasionally we'll have a parent come through a parent class and they say, that's all we have is standards. And we say, well, that's good, because in my opinion, one of the biggest dangers to these kids is texting, is phone use. And
You can't do that if you
Can't
have
do that with a standard, can you?
Yeah.
Right? You gotta be able to have one hand free to
Right.
hold the steering wheel and shift, and you just can't. You can't. And I love to see that.
Yeah.
You are allowed to obviously take the road test in a standard. The only requirement that the registry has, as far as type of vehicle for road test, is they have to have a brake in the center console. So it either has to be the parking brake or a button or something. Because years ago it was bench seats, and they would just step on your foot if it was in the way for the brake. But now they have to have some type of brake. With our car, that's not an issue because they have the second brake. Standards are going the way of the stagecoach. Unfortunately,
I would prefer to drive a standard in the bad weather.
Yes. Yep.
When I got my license, it was automatics, and I married and we moved to Japan. And we lived way up in the North Country, and dirt roads, and same amount of snow as here, no pavements, and we had a Jeep with standard transmission.
Wow.
I had never driven a standard. I had to learn. We went up to the base, and I had to drive home by myself, and I had to literally learn on the job how to drive a standard.
Wow, that's tough roads too.
And dirt roads, driving on the wrong side of the road.
Really? Wow.
So it was, it was an adventure. I will tell you, it was definitely an adventure. So, is there anything else that we've missed above and beyond what we've talked about? I think we've covered just about everything. Oh yes, we haven't covered everything. They are talking about in Massachusetts changing the law so that people over the age of 75 need to be retested. Mm-hmm. What is your opinion?
Well,
or any place being retested, or what age?
Okay, well, I don't believe that an age should dictate when a person gets retested. I really do not, because I think that it is a very individual thing. I think that if a person needs to be retested, then they should be, but I don't think it should be age-based myself. I know a lot of very good drivers that are over the age of 75, and that seems like a very huge inconvenience and a very stressful and could be an expensive thing to go through, just for the sake of because your birthday, and your 75th birthday. That does not seem right to me. But so that would be my opinion. Absolutely, Beverly. Yeah.
I know a man that's 93 and probably drives better now than he did younger because he's more careful. It doesn't take as many chances as he probably did in his 60s.
What happens as you get old, you become self-adjusting. You know, you don't drive at night because you don't drive in unfamiliar areas. You don't, you can put off what you need to do till it dries and it's not raining or snowing out. And that's why they're not really overrepresented in fatal car crashes. The teenagers still are. Yeah. Still the number one cause of death is car crashes to them. If anything, though, when we stress it at our school, the very last class we teach our students is not to text and drive. That's when we show them the movies about the dangers of texting and driving. That's when we talk about the laws, which are very strict now in Massachusetts for texting and driving. And phone use, if you're under the age of 18, they're not allowed to use the phone for anything, only to dial 911. They can't use their phone for navigation. They can't use their phone to listen to music. They can't use their phone for anything until they're over the age of 18. So that's the last thing we try to get into them, because we pile on a ton of information over the course of 30 hours, and that's the lasting impression that we want. I also brought one of our bumper stickers that we give out to our parents, and I always, and helps with road rage.
Yeah, please be patient with driver.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really interesting when I hand them out to the parents. I'll always say, please take one. That is, of course, if you think that you can get your child to allow you to put it onto your car, because unfortunately some parents, if the child doesn't want it, it doesn't go onto the car.
I think one of the things we also didn't cover is seat belts. When my son had his license for a very short time, I got the phone call that nobody wants to get from the police department. Your son's been in an accident. And I went racing down the street. The street has now been made a one-way street in Georgetown. It was a very dangerous street. It used to be two-way, and it was spring, and it was a road that they used to have to sand heavily because it was a dangerous road and twisty-turny. And car hit the sand and just lost control, went into one of those little historic stone walls. I got there, and the first thing the officer said was, he's okay, he's fine. And they all walked away because they had their seatbelts on.
Huge.
Huge.
My background as being an accident reconstructionist, when I tell you, Beverly, I have probably reconstructed the deaths of over 600 people. Only one girl was seatbelted. Only one.
Really?
Out of 600.
Only one out of 600 had the seatbelt on.
Yeah.
The rest of them did not have the seatbelts.
Nope. So you cannot, and that's something we also are very big on. We try to incorporate seatbelt usage in all of our classes, all of our 10 classes, each module, because we just think it's that important. A lot of my instructors are ex-police. I have 2 state police officers, 1 lieutenant, 1 sergeant, retired, helping me. We also have a retired Topsfield police officer. So a lot of our classes are taught by police officers, so they really get to hear what it's like from our side of the viewpoint, you know.
Is part of it that they think they've got those airbags so they don't need a seatbelt?
I don't know. It's unbelievable. Teen usage rate is like only 33% of the teens use their seatbelts, and it's something I talk to the parents all about, because this is a generation that they would not allow them to leave the hospital unless they were in a car seat.
Yeah.
What happened from the time that the car seats ended to the time they became a teenager? I'm going to tell you, because the parents aren't wearing their seatbelts.
Right.
And that's why we have one of the lowest seatbelt rates in the country. We're right down there at the bottom of the pile of the 50 states.
Right.
And that's kind of an embarrassment, I think. So seatbelts, yes.
Seatbelts,
very
yes.
important.
Texting, no.
No texting. Wear your seatbelt, because if you do everything right, you know the other guy's not. You know they're not going to give up texting. There's still drunk drivers out there. There's still speeders. At least you're doing the best you can by wearing your seatbelt to protect yourself.
And you might
from
be the
other
one
bad
to walk away.
That's right. And the situation is with your son and the other people in the car. It's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
And all the police officers that I've ever talked to and spoke with and teach with, nobody's ever unbuckled a dead person except, like I said, that one Haverhill girl many years ago on Route 495.
Okay.
Okay.
On that note,
Thank you very much.
Thank you
I
very
really
much.
appreciate your time.
it's great talking to
Thank
you.
you.
Not
Great
always
talking
a happy thing, but
No.
it's great talking to you.
But a necessary thing.
A necessary thing. So, no texting, use your seatbelts. I'm Beverly Enos. You've been watching Spotlight Georgetown. Don't forget, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Thank you for joining us. Bye for now.